The dust from the flatlands had settled in Penelope Sutton's lungs so deep she sometimes wondered if she would ever breathe clean air again. And on the morning Vincent Shaw rode into Hot Springs, South Dakota, with his weathered leather saddlebags and eyes the color of storm clouds over the plains, she was standing outside her father's general store wondering if there was anything beyond the endless brown horizon she had known for all 22 years of her life. Vincent dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who had spent more time on horseback than on his own 2 feet, tying his bay mare to the hitching post with practiced efficiency. Penelope found herself staring, which was improper, but there was something about the way he moved that suggested he had seen things she could only dream about. His hat was pulled low against the September sun of 1882, and when he tipped it to her, she caught a glimpse of sun-weathered skin and a mouth that looked like it smiled more often than it frowned. "Morning, miss," he said, his voice carrying the rough warmth of someone who talked more to horses and open sky than to people. "This the only general store in town?" "It is," Penelope replied, smoothing her apron with hands that suddenly felt clumsy. "My father owns it." "Are you passing through or staying?" "Depends on what there is to stay for," Vincent said, and there was something in the way he looked at her that made her heart do a strange little dance against her ribs. "I am looking for work. Heard there might be some cattle operations around here needing an extra hand." Penelope nodded, trying to maintain her composure even though something about this stranger made her feel suddenly awake in a way she had not felt in years. "The Morrison Ranch is hiring. They lost 2 hands last month when they headed further west looking for gold. Mr. Morrison would probably be glad to talk to you." "Further west," Vincent repeated, and something flickered in his expression. "Everyone always wants to go further west. Sometimes I think the whole country is just chasing the sunset." "Have you seen it?" The words tumbled out before Penelope could stop them. "The West, I mean. The real West, with the mountains and the ocean and all the things people talk about." Vincent's eyes softened, and he stepped closer to the porch where she stood. "I have seen things that would make your heart stop, miss. Mountains so tall they punch holes in the clouds. Ocean water so blue it looks like someone spilled the sky onto the ground. Forests so thick you could walk for days and never see the sun except through a green filter of leaves." Penelope felt something tighten in her chest, a longing so fierce it almost hurt. "I have never left South Dakota. I have never even seen a hill bigger than the ones around here. My mother died when I was young and my father needed help with the store. He always said we would travel someday, but someday never seems to come." "That is a shame," Vincent said quietly. "A woman like you should see the world. A woman like me." Penelope raised an eyebrow, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened. "You do not know anything about me. I know you are standing here asking a stranger about places you have never been instead of going inside where it is cooler," Vincent said, and now he was definitely smiling. "That tells me you have got a spirit that is bigger than this town." Before Penelope could respond, her father emerged from the store, wiping his hands on his apron. Thomas Sutton was a practical man who had spent his entire life in Hot Springs, and he looked at Vincent with the cautious assessment of someone who had learned to judge character quickly. "Can I help you, son?" Thomas asked, though his tone was not unfriendly. "I was just getting directions to the Morrison Ranch," Vincent replied, tipping his hat again. "And making the acquaintance of your daughter, if that is all right with you, sir." Thomas looked between them, and Penelope saw something calculating in his expression. Her father was getting older, and she knew he worried about what would happen to her when he was gone. A respectable cowboy with good manners might seem like an answer to his concerns. "Morrison's place is about 5 miles north," Thomas said. Follow the main road until you see the split oak tree, then head east. You cannot miss it. If you get work there, you will probably be back in town regular for supplies." "I appreciate that, sir," Vincent said. He looked at Penelope again, holding her gaze for a moment that stretched just a little too long to be casual. "Maybe I will see you again, Miss Sutton." "Maybe you will, Mr. Shaw," Penelope replied, though she had no idea how she knew his last name would be Shaw. Perhaps it was just the way he carried himself, or perhaps it was the fact that she felt like she had been waiting her entire life for someone exactly like him to ride into town. Vincent mounted his horse in one smooth motion and rode north, leaving a small cloud of dust in his wake. Penelope watched until he disappeared around the bend, and when she turned back, her father was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Do not go getting ideas," Thomas said, but his voice was gentle. "Cowboys like that, they are restless. They never stay in one place for long." "I was not getting ideas," Penelope lied, following her father back into the store. But the truth was that ideas were already blooming in her mind like wildflowers after a rain. Ideas about mountains and oceans and a man with storm-cloud eyes who looked at her like she was something worth seeing. Vincent did get the job at the Morrison Ranch, and true to Thomas's prediction, he came into town regularly for supplies. Each time he visited the general store, he found reasons to linger, talking to Penelope about everything and nothing. She learned that he was from Missouri originally, that he had left home at 18 after his parents died of fever, and that he had spent the last 7 years working his way across the Western Territories. "Why did you come back east?" Penelope asked one afternoon in late October as she wrapped up the flour and coffee beans he had purchased. The store was empty except for the two of them, and autumn sunlight slanted through the windows in golden bars. "I did not come back east," Vincent said, leaning against the counter with an ease that suggested he was comfortable in her presence. "I came north. There is a difference. I wanted to see the Badlands before winter set in, and South Dakota seemed like a good place to spend a few months." "Just a few months?" Penelope tried to keep the disappointment out of her voice. Vincent studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. "I do not know any more. I thought I knew what I was doing, just drifting from place to place, seeing everything there was to see. But lately, I have been thinking maybe there is something to be said for staying put." "What changed your mind?" Penelope's heart was beating too fast, and she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. "Met someone who made me think maybe I had been running toward something all along instead of running away," Vincent said quietly. "Someone who looks at me like I hung the moon, even though all I have done is tell stories about places I have been." Penelope set down the package she was holding, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Shaw, I think you should know that I am not the kind of woman who plays games or flirts without meaning it. If you are just passing time before you move on, please do not say things like that to me." "I am not passing time," Vincent said, and he reached across the counter to take her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and Penelope felt the touch all the way through her body. "Miss Sutton, Penelope, I know we have not known each other long, but I have never felt this way about anyone. You make me want to stop moving. You make me want to build something that lasts." "You do not know me well enough to say that," Penelope whispered, but she did not pull her hand away. "Then let me get to know you better," Vincent said. "Let me court you properly. Let me show you that I am serious about this, about you." Penelope wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw caution to the wind and dive headfirst into whatever this was between them. But she was also her father's daughter, practical and careful, and she knew that feelings this intense could burn out as quickly as they ignited. "I need to think about it," she said finally, "and I need to talk to my father." "That is fair," Vincent said, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "I will wait. I am good at waiting." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. That evening, after Vincent had left and Penelope was helping her father close up the store, Thomas Sutton collapsed behind the counter. The doctor came quickly, but his diagnosis was grim. Thomas had a weak heart, something he had apparently known about for months but had kept from his daughter. He needed rest, the doctor said, and he needed to avoid stress. "You should have told me," Penelope said, sitting beside her father's bed that night, holding his hand the way he had held hers when she was small and frightened of thunderstorms. "I did not want you to worry," Thomas said, his voice weak. "You have already given up so much to help me with the store. I did not want to be more of a burden." "You are not a burden," Penelope said fiercely. "You are my father and I love you." Thomas squeezed her hand. "That cowboy Shaw, he is a good man. I can see it in the way he looks at you, in the way he conducts himself. If he asks to court you, you should say yes." "Papa, I cannot think about that right now. I need to focus on taking care of you." "Penelope, listen to me," Thomas said, and there was an urgency in his voice that made her meet his eyes. "I have lived my whole life in this town. I never took your mother to see the ocean like I promised. I never showed her the mountains or the big cities or any of the things she dreamed about. Do not make the same mistake I did. Do not let fear or duty keep you from living." Tears burned in Penelope's eyes. "I am not leaving you. I am not asking you to leave me. I am asking you to let yourself be happy. That Shaw boy makes you happy. I can see it in the way you light up when he walks into the store." Penelope could not argue with that, so she just held her father's hand and let the tears fall silently down her cheeks. Vincent came to visit the next day, hat in hand, concern written all over his face. "I heard about your father." "I am so sorry, Penelope. Is there anything I can do?" "Just be patient with me," Penelope said. "Everything feels complicated right now." "I am not going anywhere," Vincent promised. "Take all the time you need," and he kept his word. Over the following weeks, as Thomas slowly regained his strength, Vincent became a fixture in their lives. He helped around the store when he was not working at the ranch, carrying heavy boxes and restocking shelves without being asked. He sat with Thomas in the evenings, playing cards and talking about cattle and weather and all the safe, comfortable topics that men discussed. And he looked at Penelope with such open adoration that even Thomas, in his weakened state, smiled at the obviousness of it. "You should tell him yes," Thomas said one evening after Vincent had left. "Stop torturing the poor boy." "I am not torturing him," Penelope protested. "I just want to make sure you are all right." "I am as all right as I am going to be," Thomas said. "My heart is not going to get better, Penelope. The doctor was clear about that. I have got months, maybe a year if I am lucky. I want to see you happy before I go." "Do not talk like that," Penelope said, but they both knew he was being realistic. "Tell him yes," Thomas repeated. "And Penelope, if he offers to show you those mountains and that ocean he talks about, you should go. Life is too short to spend it all in one place." The next time Vincent came to the store, Penelope pulled him aside into the back room, away from the few customers browsing the shelves. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes." Vincent looked confused for a moment, then hope dawned in his eyes. "Yes to courting, yes to me." "Yes to all of it," Penelope said. And then she was in his arms, and he was holding her like she was something precious and fragile, and she understood for the first time why people wrote poems about moments like this. "I will make you so happy," Vincent promised against her hair. "I swear I will spend every day making sure you never regret this." "I could never regret this," Penelope said, pulling back to look up at him. "I feel like I have been waiting my whole life for you." "I feel the same way," Vincent said. And then he kissed her, gentle and careful, like he was afraid she might break. It was Penelope's first kiss, and it was everything she had dreamed it would be, soft and sweet and full of promise. Their courtship was proper but intense, both of them aware that time was a luxury they might not have. Thomas's health continued to decline, though he rallied enough to enjoy the courtship unfolding under his roof. Vincent came to dinner several times a week, and on Sundays, after church, he would take Penelope for walks along the creek that ran just outside of town. "Tell me about the ocean," Penelope said one Sunday in December, as they walked hand in hand through the bare winter landscape. Snow had fallen the night before, and everything was white and pristine. "It is like standing at the edge of forever," Vincent said. "The water goes on and on until it meets the sky, and you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. The waves come in with this sound, this constant rushing that gets into your bones, and the smell, salt and brine, and something wild that you cannot find anywhere else." "It sounds beautiful," Penelope said wistfully. "It is. But you know what is even more beautiful? The mountains. I worked for a ranch in California once, right up against the Sierra Nevada range. Those mountains, Penelope, they are like God decided to build a cathedral out of stone and snow. They are so big they make you feel small, but in a good way, like you are part of something larger than yourself." "I wish I could see them," Penelope said softly. Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "What if you could? What if we went together? Vincent, I cannot leave my father, not now." "I know," Vincent said quickly. "I am not suggesting we run away. I am thinking further ahead. When we are married, when things are settled, we could take a trip. I could show you everything, the ocean and the mountains and all the places in between. When we are married," Penelope's heart was pounding. "Are you proposing to me, Vincent Shaw?" "Not properly," Vincent said, and now he looked nervous. "I want to do it right. I want to ask your father's permission and get you a ring and make it special. But yes, that is what I want. I want to marry you, Penelope Sutton. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you the world and making you happy." "Then yes," Penelope said, laughing and crying at the same time. "When you ask me properly, the answer will be yes." Vincent spun her around, both of them laughing like children, snow falling around them in soft white flakes. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and this time it was less careful, more passionate, a promise of all the things to come. He asked Thomas for permission that very evening, and Thomas gave his blessing with tears in his eyes. "Take care of my girl," he said to Vincent. "Show her all the things I never could." "I will, sir," Vincent promised. "I give you my word." The next day, Vincent rode into the neighboring town and returned with a simple gold band set with a small but beautiful sapphire. He proposed to Penelope properly in the parlor of their home, down on one knee, with Thomas watching from his chair by the fire. "Penelope Sutton, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met," Vincent said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You are smart and kind and brave, and you make me want to be a better man. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Penelope said, and her voice did not waver. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in February of 1883 in a small ceremony at the Hot Springs Church with half the town in attendance. Penelope wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and Vincent wore a new suit he had purchased especially for the occasion. Thomas walked her down the aisle, though he leaned heavily on her arm, and when he placed her hand in Vincent's, he whispered, "Be happy, my little girl." "I will, Papa," Penelope promised. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, close enough to the general store that Penelope could help her father when he needed it, but far enough away that they had privacy. Vincent continued to work at the Morrison Ranch, and Penelope split her time between the store and their new home. It was a simple life, but it was theirs, and Penelope had never been happier. But Thomas's health continued to fail. By April, he was bedridden, and by May, the doctor said it was only a matter of time. Penelope spent long hours at his bedside, reading to him and holding his hand, and Vincent was always there, supporting her, letting her cry on his shoulder when the weight of it became too much. Thomas Sutton passed away on a warm evening in June, with Penelope and Vincent by his side. His last words were, "Go see the ocean, Penny. Promise me you will go see the ocean." "I promise, Papa," Penelope whispered, and then he was gone. The grief was heavy, a physical weight that Penelope carried with her everywhere. Vincent held her through the worst of it, patient and steady, never trying to rush her healing. They sold the general store to a family from Rapid City who had been looking to settle in Hot Springs, and the money from the sale gave them a financial cushion they had not had before. "What do you want to do?" Vincent asked one evening in July as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I want to keep my promise to my father," Penelope said. "I want to see the ocean. I want to see the mountains. I want to see all the things you told me about." Vincent took her hand. "Then that is what we will do. How would you feel about taking a long trip west? I have been thinking about it, and there is a way to see both the mountains and the ocean in the same journey. We could take the train from here to Wyoming, then travel through the Rockies and make our way to California. We could see the Pacific Ocean. It would be a real adventure." "Could we really do that?" Penelope felt a flicker of excitement breaking through the grief. "Could we see both in one trip?" "We could see both in one day if we planned it right," Vincent said, warming to the idea. "There are places in California where the mountains come right down to the coast. I worked a ranch near there once. We could take you to the mountains in the morning and have you standing at the edge of the ocean by sunset. One day, both dreams." Penelope felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tightness that had been there since her father's death. "Let us do it. Let us go west." They spent the next few weeks preparing for the journey, selling off furniture they did not need, packing clothes and supplies, and arranging their finances. Vincent quit his job at the Morrison Ranch, and they purchased train tickets to Cheyenne, Wyoming, with plans to continue west from there. The morning they left Hot Springs, Penelope stood at the edge of town and looked back at the only home she had ever known. The flat brown landscape stretched out behind her, familiar and comfortable and suddenly far too small. "Any regrets?" Vincent asked, standing beside her with their bags at his feet. "Not a single one," Penelope said, and she meant it. "I am ready to see the world." The train ride to Cheyenne was Penelope's first experience with rail travel, and she was enchanted by the speed and power of the locomotive. She pressed her face to the window like a child, watching the landscape roll past, seeing her first real hills and then, as they approached Wyoming, her first mountains in the distance. "Those are the Rockies," Vincent said, pointing to the snow-capped peaks on the horizon. "We will be right up in them soon." From Cheyenne, they took another train west through the heart of the Rocky Mountains, and Penelope could barely breathe as she watched the peaks rise around them, massive and majestic, exactly as Vincent had described. The train climbed through passes and tunneled through solid rock, and Penelope felt like she was entering another world entirely. They stopped in Salt Lake City for a few days, seeing the Great Salt Lake and the temple the Mormons were building, and then they continued west through Nevada and into California. The journey took weeks, but Penelope did not mind. Every day brought new sights and experiences, and Vincent was the perfect companion, patient with her endless questions, delighted by her wonder at everything they saw. "We are getting close," Vincent said one morning in late August as their train climbed through the mountains of Northern California. "I talked to the conductor, and he said if we get off at the next station, we can hire horses and make it to the coast by late afternoon. The mountains here come right down to the ocean. You will be able to see both in the same day, just like I promised." Penelope's heart was racing with excitement. "Really? Today?" "Today," Vincent confirmed, grinning at her enthusiasm. "I am going to show my wife the ocean and the mountains all in one day." They disembarked at a small station in the coastal range, a settlement barely big enough to qualify as a town. Vincent arranged for 2 horses from a local stable, and by mid-morning they were riding west through forests so thick and green that Penelope felt like she had stepped into a fairy tale. "I have never seen so many trees," she breathed, craning her neck to look up at the towering redwoods and pines. "And everything is so green." "How is everything so green?" "Rain," Vincent said. "This part of California gets rain from the ocean. It is different from the desert and plains we are used to." They climbed higher into the mountains, following trails that Vincent seemed to know by instinct. The air grew cooler and thinner, and Penelope found herself breathing hard as their horses picked their way up steep slopes. But Vincent had been right. The mountains were like nothing she had ever imagined, ancient and powerful, covered in forests that seemed to go on forever. "We are almost to the top of this ridge," Vincent called back to her. "Once we get there, you will be able to see the ocean." Penelope urged her horse forward, her heart pounding with anticipation. They crested the ridge, and Vincent pulled his horse to a stop, turning to watch her face as she saw it for the first time. The Pacific Ocean spread out before them, impossibly vast and blue, stretching to the horizon where it met the sky in a hazy line. The water sparkled in the afternoon sun, and Penelope could see waves rolling toward the shore far below, white foam breaking against dark rocks. The sight was so overwhelming, so much bigger and more beautiful than anything she had imagined, that tears sprang to her eyes. "Oh, Vincent," she whispered. "It is perfect." "We are not done yet," Vincent said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. "We are standing in the mountains right now, looking at the ocean. Both in one day, just like I promised. But if you want, we can ride down to the beach and you can put your feet in the water." "Yes," Penelope said immediately. "I want to touch it. I want to feel it." They spent the next hour riding down the mountain toward the coast, following switchback trails that gave them alternating views of forest and ocean. As they descended, Penelope could hear the waves, that constant rushing sound Vincent had described, and smell the salt in the air. It was intoxicating, this newness, this sense of standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. Finally, they reached the beach, a stretch of dark sand and smooth stones with waves breaking against the shore in rolling lines of white foam. Penelope dismounted before Vincent could help her, and she ran toward the water, kicking off her boots as she went. The first touch of ocean water on her feet made her gasp. It was cold, colder than she had expected, and it surged around her ankles with surprising force. She laughed out loud, a sound of pure joy, and waded deeper until the water was up to her knees, soaking the hem of her dress. Vincent caught up with her, having left the horses tied to a piece of driftwood. He had rolled up his pants and removed his own boots, and he waded into the water beside her, grinning at her delight. "What do you think?" he asked. "It is everything," Penelope said, turning to face him. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair coming loose from its pins, and she looked more alive than she had in months. "It is everything you said it would be and more. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for showing me the world. Thank you for letting me," Vincent said. He pulled her into his arms, not caring that they were both soaking wet, and kissed her with the waves crashing around them and the mountains rising behind them and the whole wide world spreading out in every direction. "I love you," Penelope said when they finally broke apart. "I love you so much I do not have words for it." "I love you too," Vincent said. "More than mountains, more than oceans, more than anything." They stayed on the beach until sunset, watching the sky turn gold and orange and pink. The same colors Penelope had watched from her porch in South Dakota, but somehow more vivid here, reflected in the water and the wet sand. She told Vincent about her childhood, about the dreams she had harbored of seeing the world, about her mother who had died too young and her father who had loved her enough to push her toward the life he never had. Vincent held her and listened, and Penelope felt like all the broken pieces of her heart were finally starting to fit back together. "What do you want to do now?" Vincent asked as the last light faded from the sky. "We could stay in California for a while, find work on a ranch down here. Or we could keep traveling, see more of the country. Or we could go back to South Dakota, settle down properly. It is your choice." Penelope thought about it, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "I want to go home," she said finally. "Not to Hot Springs necessarily, but somewhere we can build a real life. I am glad we took this trip. I needed to see these things to know what is out there, but I think I am ready to put down roots now. With you." "That sounds perfect," Vincent said. "What about Montana?" "I have heard good things about the territory up there. Plenty of open land, good cattle country, not too different from South Dakota but with mountains nearby if you want to see them." "Montana," Penelope repeated, testing the word. "Yes, let us go to Montana and build a life there." They spent 2 more days on the California coast, staying in a small boarding house and spending their time exploring the beaches and forests. Penelope collected shells and smooth stones, treasures to remind her of this place, and Vincent taught her to read the tides and identify the seabirds that wheeled overhead. But eventually, it was time to leave. They began the long journey east and north, retracing their path through California and Nevada, then angling north through Idaho toward Montana. The trip took weeks, and by the time they reached the Montana Territory in early October of 1883, the aspens were turning gold and there was a bite of winter in the air. They settled in a town called Larkspur, nestled in a valley with mountains visible on the western horizon. Vincent found work on a cattle ranch owned by a widow named Eleanor Morrison, no relation to the Morrisons back in South Dakota, who needed reliable hands to help her run her operation. The work was hard but honest, and Vincent was good at it, his years of experience serving him well. Penelope found work at the local school, teaching reading and arithmetic to the children of ranchers and homesteaders. She had always been good with numbers from helping her father in the store, and she discovered she loved teaching, loved seeing the spark of understanding in a child's eyes when they finally grasped a difficult concept. They rented a small house on the edge of town, and Penelope made it into a home, hanging curtains and planting a garden and filling the rooms with the warmth and comfort she had learned from her father. It was not a grand life, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and filled with love. In the spring of 1884, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Vincent was overjoyed, spinning her around the kitchen and talking about all the things he would teach their child, all the places they would see together as a family. Penelope was nervous but happy, thinking about her own mother and hoping she would be half the parent her father had been. Their son was born in December of 1884, a healthy baby with his father's storm cloud eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Penelope's father, and he was perfect in every way that mattered. Watching Vincent with their son, seeing the gentle way he held the tiny baby and the wonder in his expression. Penelope fell in love with her husband all over again. He was patient and attentive, getting up in the middle of the night for feedings, changing diapers without complaint, singing soft songs in his rough cowboy voice until Thomas fell asleep against his chest. "You are a natural at this," Penelope said one evening, watching Vincent rock their son by the fire. "I am just trying not to mess it up," Vincent admitted. "I want to be a good father. I want to give him everything, show him everything, teach him to be brave and kind and true." "You will," Penelope assured him. "You already are." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent worked the ranch, moving up to foreman within 2 years thanks to his skill and dedication. Penelope continued teaching, taking Thomas with her to the schoolhouse where he played quietly in the corner while she taught her lessons. The community embraced them, and they made friends, real friends, people who cared about them and celebrated their joys and supported them through their sorrows. In 1886, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with lungs like a bellows and a temperament to match. They named her Rose, and she was as different from Thomas as night from day, loud where he was quiet, bold where he was cautious. Vincent adored her, calling her his wild rose, and Penelope marveled at how her heart, which she had thought was already full, somehow expanded to hold even more love. The years passed in a blur of childhood milestones and seasonal rhythms. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Rose was a whirlwind, climbing trees and catching frogs and keeping her parents constantly on their toes. Vincent taught them both to ride, and Penelope taught them to read, and together they gave their children a childhood full of love and adventure. In the summer of 1890, when Thomas was 5 and Rose was 4, Vincent came home one day with an announcement. "Eleanor is selling the ranch," he said. "Her health is failing, and she wants to move to Denver to be with her daughter. She offered to sell me a portion of the land, enough to start our own operation. It would be hard work, and we would have to take on some debt, but it would be ours. What do you think?" Penelope looked around their small house, thought about the life they had built in Larkspur, and felt a surge of love for this man who still, after all these years, made her heart beat faster. "I think we should do it. I think we should build something that will last, something we can pass on to Thomas and Rose." They purchased 200 acres of land with a small house and a barn that needed repairs. Vincent threw himself into the work, and Penelope helped however she could, juggling her teaching job with the demands of the ranch. They hired 2 hands to help with the cattle, young men looking to learn the trade, and slowly but surely, the Shaw Ranch began to thrive. Thomas showed an early aptitude for ranching, following his father everywhere and absorbing everything Vincent taught him. Rose was more interested in the horses than the cattle, and by the time she was 8, she could outride most of the adult hands. Penelope watched her children grow and thrive, and she thought about her father, about the dreams he had harbored for her, and she knew he would be proud. In the evenings, after the children were in bed and the day's work was done, Vincent and Penelope would sit on their porch and watch the sun set behind the mountains. Sometimes they talked about the early days, about hot springs and the trip west, and the first time Penelope had seen the ocean. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, needing no words to communicate what they felt. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked one evening in the summer of 1895. "Leaving Hot Springs, coming all this way, tying yourself to a wandering cowboy?" "Not for a single second," Penelope said, and she meant it with her whole heart. "You gave me the world, Vincent. You showed me mountains and oceans, and then you gave me a home and a family and a life I could never have imagined. How could I regret any of that? "I am the lucky one," Vincent said. "I spent so many years drifting, thinking I was looking for something I could not name. Turns out I was looking for you all along. You are my home, Penny. You always have been." Penelope leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children play in the yard, the mountains purple in the distance. And she thought about the girl she had been, standing outside her father's store in South Dakota, dreaming of horizons she had never seen. She thought about the cowboy who had ridden into her life and changed everything, who had taken her west and shown her wonders, and then built a life with her that was more wonderful than anything she could have imagined. In 1897, Eleanor Morrison passed away, and true to her word, she left the remainder of the original ranch to Vincent and Penelope in her will. With the additional land, the Shaw Ranch became one of the larger operations in the valley, and Vincent's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher grew. They hired more hands, expanded their herd, and built a new, larger house to accommodate their growing family, because there was more growing to come. In 1898, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. Their third child, a daughter they named Clara, was born in early 1899. She was a quiet baby, content to observe the world with wide eyes, and she seemed to have inherited her father's steady temperament and her mother's intelligence. Thomas was 14 by then, nearly a man, and he doted on his baby sister with a gentleness that made Penelope's heart ache. Rose, at 13, was less interested in babies and more interested in breaking horses, but she too softened around Clara, carrying her around on her hip and singing to her in a surprisingly sweet voice. The new century dawned, and with it came changes. The Wild West was becoming less wild, towns growing into cities, railroads connecting distant places, the lawless frontier giving way to civilization. But in their valley in Montana, life continued much as it had, governed by the seasons and the needs of the cattle and the rhythms of ranch life. Vincent was 42 now, his hair starting to gray at the temples, his face weathered by years of sun and wind. But he was still strong and vital, still the man who could gentle a wild horse with a soft word, still the man who looked at Penelope like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Penelope was 40, and she looked at her reflection sometimes and barely recognized the woman staring back. She was no longer the sheltered girl from Hot Springs who had never seen a hill. She was a rancher's wife, a mother, a teacher, a woman who had built a life with her own hands and filled it with love. Her hands were rough from work, her face lined from years of sun and laughter, and she had never been happier. In the summer of 1902, they took their children on a trip west, retracing the journey Vincent and Penelope had taken nearly 20 years earlier. Thomas was 17, Rose was 16, and Clara was 3, and they traveled by train through the Rockies and into California, all the way to the coast. Penelope watched her children's faces as they saw the ocean for the first time, saw the same wonder and awe she had felt all those years ago, and she felt a profound sense of completion. This was what her father had wanted for her, this richness of experience, this fullness of life. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent as they stood on the beach, watching their children play in the waves. "Thank you for making all my dreams come true." "You made mine come true first," Vincent said, putting his arm around her waist. "Every day with you is more than I ever hoped for." They spent a week on the coast, and then they journeyed home to Montana, to the ranch and the life they had built. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew older, showing a business sense that impressed even Vincent. Rose announced her intention to train horses professionally, and Vincent supported her, even when some of the neighbors raised eyebrows at the idea of a woman doing such work. Clara grew into a bright, curious child who loved books as much as her older brother and showed an early talent for drawing. In 1905, Thomas married a young woman from a neighboring ranch, a practical girl named Catherine who loved the land as much as he did. They built a house on the Shaw property, and within a year, Vincent and Penelope became grandparents to a baby boy named Vincent Thomas Shaw. Holding his grandson for the first time, Vincent cried, not bothering to hide his tears, and Penelope thought her heart would burst from the fullness of it all. Rose never married, content with her horses and her independence, but she was a beloved aunt to her nephew and later, to Thomas and Catherine's other children, 2 more boys and a girl. She built her own house on the ranch property and ran a successful horse training operation that drew clients from across the territory. Clara grew into a beautiful young woman with a talent for art that could not be denied. When she was 18, she announced her intention to study at an art school in San Francisco. And though Penelope was sad to see her go, she encouraged her daughter to follow her dreams. After all, she knew better than anyone the importance of seeing the world beyond the horizon. The years continued to roll past, marked by births and deaths, triumphs and setbacks, the normal rhythm of a life well lived. Vincent's hair went fully gray, and then white, and he moved a little slower, but his eyes still sparked with life, and he still reached for Penelope's hand in the night. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1908 with a party that filled the ranch house with friends and family. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, and as Penelope looked around at the life they had built, at the people they had brought into the world and the love that filled every corner of the room, she thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, coming to stand beside her as the party continued around them. "Everything," Penelope said. "That day you rode into Hot Springs, the first time I saw the ocean. The day Thomas was born, all of it. I am thinking about how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Vincent said. "We found each other. That is the rarest thing in the world." In 1910, they sold the bulk of the ranch operations to Thomas, who had proven himself more than capable of running things. Vincent and Penelope kept their house and a small portion of the land, enough for a few horses and a garden, and they settled into a quieter life. Vincent was 60 now, and though he was still healthy, he was content to let his son take over the harder work. They spent their days together, riding through the mountains, tending their garden, playing with their grandchildren. Penelope finally had time to read all the books she had always wanted to read, and Vincent took up woodworking, carving beautiful pieces of furniture and toys for the grandchildren. Clara returned from San Francisco in 1912 with a portfolio full of paintings and a young man she introduced as her fiancé, an artist named James who looked at her daughter the way Vincent had once looked at Penelope. They married that summer, and Clara and James built a small studio on the ranch property where they could both work. In 1915, on a clear autumn day when the aspens were blazing gold against the mountains, Vincent and Penelope rode out to their favorite spot, a meadow high in the foothills where they could see for miles in every direction. They had come here countless times over the years, and it had become their place, sacred in its familiarity. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching clouds drift past overhead, holding hands like they always had. Vincent was 65 now, his face deeply lined, his body showing the wear of a life spent outdoors. Penelope was 63, her hair more silver than dark, her hands marked by decades of work. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people they had been in the beginning, the cowboy and the shopkeeper's daughter who had fallen in love in a dusty town in South Dakota. "I need to tell you something," Vincent said, and there was something in his voice that made Penelope turn to look at him fully. "I saw a doctor in town last week. My heart is not good, Penny. He said I might have a year, maybe less." Penelope felt the words like a physical blow, but she forced herself to stay calm. They had known this was coming eventually. They were not young anymore. "How long have you known?" "A few months. I did not want to worry you. I wanted us to have these last months without that shadow hanging over us." "We will make them count," Penelope said, squeezing his hand. "However long we have, we will make every day count," and they did. They spent that winter surrounded by family, telling stories of the old days, teaching the grandchildren all the things they had learned over a lifetime. Vincent carved a beautiful rocking chair for Penelope, and she made him a quilt from scraps of fabric that told the story of their life together, squares from her wedding dress, and the children's baby clothes and curtains from every house they had lived in. Spring came, and Vincent rallied, strong enough to ride again, to work in the garden, to play with the grandchildren. But Penelope could see the effort it cost him, the way he tired more easily, the shadow that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was looking. On a warm evening in June of 1916, they were sitting on their porch, watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, and the mountains were purple silhouettes against the fading light. "Do you remember the day we stood on that beach in California?" Vincent asked, his voice soft. "The day I showed you the mountains and the ocean in one day." "I remember," Penelope said. "I remember every detail. It was the most beautiful day of my life until all the days that came after." "That is how I feel about every day I have spent with you," Vincent said. "Every single one has been beautiful. You made my life beautiful, Penny. I want you to know that." "You made mine beautiful too," Penelope said, tears running down her cheeks. "You gave me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more." Vincent lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you. I have loved you from the moment I saw you standing outside that store in Hot Springs. I will love you until my last breath and whatever comes after." "I love you too," Penelope whispered. "Always." They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands, not needing words. And sometime in the night, Vincent Shaw, cowboy and rancher and the love of Penelope's life, slipped away peacefully, his hand still clasped in hers. The grief was immense, a tidal wave that threatened to drown Penelope. But she was not alone. Her children surrounded her. Her grandchildren filled her house with life and noise. And the community that she and Vincent had been part of for over 30 years rallied around her with meals and support and memories of the man who had touched so many lives. They buried Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains he had loved. The whole valley turned out for the funeral, and person after person told Penelope stories about her husband, about his kindness and his skill and his integrity. She listened to them all, filing away these pieces of Vincent that she had not known, grateful that he had been so loved. In the months that followed, Penelope found her footing again. She spent time with her children and grandchildren. She tended her garden. She rode through the mountains, remembering all the rides she and Vincent had taken together. And slowly, the sharp edge of grief softened into something gentler, a sweet ache of missing him that she knew would never fully go away. She lived for another 12 years, long enough to see her grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, long enough to become a great-grandmother 4 times over. She watched Clara's art gain recognition, exhibited in galleries in San Francisco and Denver. She saw Thomas expand the ranch into one of the most successful operations in Montana. She watched Rose train horses that won prizes across the western states. And through it all, she carried Vincent with her, his memory a constant presence, his love a foundation she built the rest of her life on. Penelope Shaw passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1928, at the age of 76. She was found by Clara, who had come to visit, sitting in the rocking chair Vincent had made for her, the quilt she had made for him wrapped around her shoulders, a peaceful smile on her face. They buried her next to Vincent on the hill overlooking the ranch, and the whole valley turned out for her funeral just as they had for his. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around her grave, and Thomas spoke about the remarkable woman she had been. The girl from South Dakota who had never seen the ocean or the mountains until a cowboy took her west and showed her both in one day. She used to tell us that story, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. About the day Dad took her to see the mountains and the ocean. She said it was the day she understood that the world was bigger and more beautiful than she had ever imagined. But the truth is, she made the world bigger and more beautiful for all of us. She taught us to dream, to work hard, to love fiercely, to build something that lasts. And that is what she and Dad did. They built something that will last forever in this land and in all of us. The Shaw Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down from parent to child, a legacy of love and hard work and dreams realized. And on the hill overlooking it all, Vincent and Penelope Shaw rested side by side, their story complete, their love eternal, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was more beautiful than mountains, more vast than oceans, more enduring than time itself.